We're actually going to be in Psalm 37, which is no problem. It must have been a little bit of a miscommunication, which is good because it keeps you aware. You're expecting one thing, but you're getting something else. It seems as though that is kind of what we're seeing in our world today. We're expecting one thing, and something else is popping up. We're in the midst of crazy change in our country, in our world, and oftentimes we don't want to, but we can't help but pay attention. Yeah. Pay attention to the news. And so we play this game when we were at New Vision. They would ask, so check your phone. Which is the number one app you look on your phone? And unfortunately, mine was New York Times. Yeah, because I was a news junkie for a while. Because everything that was happening in the world was so concerning. Everything seemed like the things that I valued was going in the opposite direction. And honestly, I got hooked on some of the clickbait, on some of the things where they're saying, oh my gosh, this is going to go, the World War III is on the way, and so on and so forth. And this was actually a few years ago. I had to take breaks from reading the news and paying attention to the news just for my sanity and for my soul, because I was paying attention. So I gave up news for Lent. That's how bad it got. It was really helpful, by the way, because paying attention means you get really caught up in anxiety. So much of the things you cannot control. Okay? It's bad enough that life itself is so stressful. There are so many things going on in our context of our work, in the context of our family. Not only for those of us who are working have to, think about our finances and our families' needs and so on and so forth, but we're living in amongst people who are not very kind, not very ethical oftentimes. If you have any idea what the personal scam rate is, especially for elders, you would be shocked. We're living in a world where actually evil is trending, okay? You'll feel it. I don't know if you do, but I feel it. This is not a place of safety. This is not a sense that everything is going to be nice and easy and we're just kind of going forward. And I'm just going to give you some reasons why in what's happening in our world. For those of you who grew up after the fall of the Soviet Union and kind of before the last maybe 10 years, that window was a magic window. Probably the first what was like that in modern history, where there was no real threat to the United States. There was no huge, it was a monopolar world, geopolitically. And so if you look at the music, if you look at all of the things that people were concerned about and thinking about, nobody was freaked out. Everybody was so happy. But surprisingly, we're not in that place anymore, and we're not going back to that place anymore. One of the things I pay attention to is this podcast, or this YouTube podcast called Diary of a CEO. Partly because they're long form. They're like an hour long sometimes. Okay, I don't like these really short descriptions, and they kind of give you the summaries, and they don't go into depth. And they get into like the most in-depth, thoughtful, clear descriptions of all kinds of topics. The guy actually who's the host of this, he's really good at asking the right questions. And oftentimes it's about like health. It's about, fitness, it's about, nutrition, and about relationships, and so on and so forth. Everything is really insightful. This one actually really pushed all the wrong buttons for me into a place of anxiety. Because they got three people on this panel. One of them is an author and journalist who wrote a book after spending years figuring out what exactly happens between the button when the president pushes the button to send the nuclear missiles to 72 minutes later when we have nuclear winter. And basically saying they figured out if this happens, there's no way to go back. And so she actually is really aware. So she's one of the panelists. And another guy who actually does a lot of figuring out how media works in global affairs. And this other guy is an Iranian dude. He sits there and he does war games with the generals, and he basically sets it up so that a situation like what happened with January 6th, right? There was a rush on the Capitol by all these people, but he sets it up in such a way that it's the military, and then basically says you generals have to somehow control the media with the whole country. This is a war game. and there's going to be a room of maybe 10 to 12 trolls. It was the whole most professional, most skilled informational specialists from the country versus 6 to 10 trolls, and the trolls won. They couldn't figure out how to stop 6 to 10 trolls from the disinformation. Okay, this stuff is scaring me. And the last guy, he's actually an interesting dude. He's a former CIA dude. And he's talking about how he is moving his family out of the country before 2026. Okay, this is it. So you listen to this, and you can watch this, okay? It's in long form, but very insightful of the very reasons why, if you're paying attention, you are anxious. You're scared, yeah? This is the tagline underneath. The World War III threat assessment. These 3 experts are talking about it. The West is collapsing. Can we stop it? This is only July 10th, so it's not that long ago. So if you're paying attention to a global economic information context, if you're paying attention to this, you are really kind of scared, yeah? For the first time in a long time, the top threat to the top global risk actually is state-run conflict, armed conflict between countries, okay? It wasn't like this before. In fact, global conflicts have doubled in the last 5 years, okay? You hear it in the news, what's happening with Gaza and with Syria and Hezbollah, and now with Iran. That's just the Middle East. And with Ukraine, all the stuff that's happening. You probably didn't hear about what happened with India and Pakistan, 2 nuclear nations that almost went to war. This is happening constantly, yeah. That's the highest number. We've had the highest number of countries engaged in conflict since World War II. So all of this to say, that's just one little part of the map of why we should be freaked out. The world is not what we thought it was. It's being run by not these evil men, but there are a ton of evil men, evil systems that are actually threatening not only our sense of what was and what is peaceful, but going forward, it's a murky environment. We're living in a post-truth world where, in fact, nobody knows what to really believe. In fact, that war game about disinformation and misinformation, it's real. Okay, it's not just your parents believing that vitamin C, cures cancer, because my parents read that in the newspaper, they believe that, right? Now, it's people who are really smart can't make sense of our world. We don't know exactly what's happening. We don't know who to trust. This is before AI has taken off. I read a whole sermon on AI a year ago, or a year and a half ago, and I'm realizing I only scratched the surface of the changes that it's going to bring in our life. Climate change, the fact that our democracy is under threat. We don't really know what America is going to look like in 10 years. The rapid changes that are happening, right, if you're even paying attention, to a point where most of us actually say, I don't care. It's too much information. I can't handle this. I'm not in control, so I'm just going to be happy in my little, that's what my wife does. Like, I say, do you know what's happening? She's like, don't talk to me. I don't care, right? I'm going to run. I'm going to be with my dogs and so on and so forth. But for those of us who do, who can't help but hear this, see this, you run into somebody and they're maybe from a different political aisle, and they're up in your face, and next thing you know, you're feeling more than just anxiety. You're feeling anger, okay? You're getting upset because this stuff is real. It's going to affect you. It's already affecting us, yeah? The reason why I'm preaching this sermon is partly because I'm spending a good amount of my pastoral time praying with people coming to me and saying, I don't know what to do. I have this anxiety. I have this frustration. I have this anger. I can't even talk to somebody in my own family because of the way that they are seeing the world and they're projecting. And on top of that, I don't know what to do with all the stuff that's happening. It's just piled on. Anxiety is probably the number one issue that Americans are facing right now. Yeah. What do you do? What do you do when your life is crazy and just trying to keep your head above water is a chore, it's a task. But what do you do when evil itself feels like it's trending and you don't have control? It seems like it's a modern problem, but actually it's not. It is a human condition, what happened when sin moves in our world, okay? G.K. Chesterton, who was actually a very, very thoughtful theologian, writer, he basically said, there's one teaching of the Bible that is the most provable. That's called original sin, right? You want to make sense of why our world is so messed up, why I'm so messed up and you're messed up, is because sin is loose in the world. Yeah. And if you try to live as though everybody's nice, everything is going to be controllable, everything's going to be fine, you're in for a rude awakening. That in fact, back in the time of David, David had to wrestle with this. What do you do when evil is trending? When it feels like evil is winning? When it feels like those who do wrong are succeeding? It is a very honest feeling. The anger, the frustration, the vexation that comes, the anxiety that comes when you don't know how to deal with a world like this. And so Psalm 37, verses 1 through 10 was what we were supposed to be reading. You'll hear it. I'll have it in here, but just follow along here because we're just going to cover this because ultimately, surprisingly, this psalm is a what to do. A what to do when evil is trending. Coming from David, thousands of years before, who faced it. David was a fully human person, experiencing life with God, life with others, life in a broken world, life with enemies, life in a setting where it felt like, even as king, evil was trending. What do you do? Well, if you look at Psalm 37, there's a lot more verses than verses 1 through 10. And honestly, it's kind of like he repeats himself quite a bit, again and again, again and again. But if you look at there's a pattern here, and instead of reading it straight, I would have assumed that it would have been read straight already. I'm just going to try to walk through that psalm, verses 1 through 10, with this in mind. What do you do? And there are three patterns here that repeated. Number one, before you think about what to do actively, proactively, when evil is trending, you start with what do you not do? The first thing is a stop. Stop doing this thing that is going to prevent you from being active, proactive, and navigating this kind of setting. It's really important. I'm going to spend a little time there. Stop. Don't do this. What not to do. And the second point in this psalm that's repeated again and again is, okay, or given a lot of time to explain what should you do is the positive aspect of when evil is trending, you've stopped doing this and you're starting to do this. Okay, so there's a kind of a negative, don't do this, and a positive, do a lot of this. And then the third, as oftentimes we see in the scriptures, when there are commands, stop doing this, do this instead, there's a promise. If you do this, this is what will happen. Because God stands behind his commands. God is above. He is watching. He is paying attention. He is going to follow through on his promises. And so, just pay attention to those three. Maybe it'll help us to organize these 10 verses for now, at least. And pretty much the Psalm 37. So, what is the thing that we're supposed to stop? And it starts right away in verse 1. Okay? Do not fret. Okay? Fret is an old word, and I'm surprised a lot of the translations, in modern translations, still use this. Fret only shows up actually in this psalm and one proverb. And so they took this word in the Hebrew and they translated here fret. Who knows what fret means? Yeah, worry, right? Like, right? It's actually, the base word is a word for burning rage. To a place where you just don't know what to do. Smoldering frustration, vexation. Right? Anybody felt that before? Right? All right. Be honest. Anybody felt that before? Right? To a place where you've lost your cool. It's overwhelming you. Okay? And he doesn't even give you a setup. It's just basically, don't do it. Okay? Do not fret because of those who are evil. So you know why a person might fret. Because you're paying attention to all these crazy people in high places who don't care about humanity and are throwing meat waves to kill people just for, a few kilometers of property. You're seeing human rights abuses beyond what we can begin to imagine. Mass starvation, so on and so forth, that's happening right under. if you pay attention to this stuff, you're like, oh, do not fret because those who are evil. And the interesting part is don't be envious of those who do wrong. Okay? Fret, rage, burning, smoldering, whether it's resentment or frustration and envy. Because if you can't beat them, join them. They seem like they are winning. They're lying, they're cheating, they're getting all of what they want through all the wrong means, and they're winning. And so if you can't beat them, join them. Anybody know what that feels like? I was in college, and I went to a tough school, and for the first time in my life, I was the dumbest person in the room. And there are also some more smarter than me, so I had to work really hard. And I worked really hard, and I wasn't doing very well. I was taking OChem, and the median for our OChem classes for tests was 16. If you got a 16, you got a B minus out of 100. So that was they trying to weed people out. I was in the OChem class, and I'm racking my brain, and I look over at my friend. He cracked out his book. Nobody was watching. And he got his answers and so on and so forth. And I'm like, oh, man. You know? And then later on, I found out he did so much better than I did. And so I'm like, well, he's cheating. And actually, he eventually did a lot better than I did. He went to medical school, and he's a great doctor and so on and so forth. Good on him. But I remember that moment thinking, is it worth it? Getting barely scraping by. I think I got a B plus in OChem. I barely scraped by. But he got an A because he cheated. Yeah. And I had this incredible temptation to do what he did. Yeah. Sometimes it feels like that. David knows what it's like to be oppressed by evil. King Saul, full of jealousy, full of rage, would be overcome by a demonic spirit. And when he would see David, he would grab the javelin and just huck it at him in public. David, being spry, jumped out of the way several times and then ran for his life and was running for years. Okay? To have somebody so angry at you when you didn't do anything wrong and you're suffering, your life is under threat, you can't go home because of this mad king. And it's this David who says, I know what it's like to face a situation like this. And I know what to do. First and foremost, do not fret. Do not get consumed with this rage, this anger, even when it feels right. This is repeated in verse 8. Refrain from anger and repent from wrath. Do not fret. It only leads to evil. It seems like when somebody's up in your grill and doing all these bad things, you want to fight back, you want to play dirty, you want to get back at them so that they don't mess with you. Or even if you don't do that, you want that rage and that anger feels righteous, especially if you do it somebody you love. Yeah? I think we underestimate the danger and the power of anger. Anger, when harnessed in the right way and the right amount and the right timing, is powerful. We're meant to be that way. God has a kind of anger that is righteous, that we are made in His image, that we can operate from. But anger is often the tool by which the enemy captures our thoughts, our desires, and twists them. Before we know it, the very people that we are trying to help are the ones that are being scorched. And so this call to refrain from anger, turn from wrath, it only leads to evil, is echoed throughout the Scriptures. Know this, my beloved brothers, this is from the book of James, verse 19. Let every person be quick to hear, slow to speak, slow to anger. Okay, watch out. Don't jump. Anger is not your number one response when you're surrounded by evil and by wrong. And this is why he says it. For the anger of man does not produce the righteousness of God. You would think that it does. You have this righteous rage, and you're going to do something about it. It's invigorating. It feels powerful, right? Saul knows what he's talking about when he says this. Saul says, when he saw these Jews who are believing in this Christ person, he was so angry, and in the name of righteousness, he was tracking them down, he was killing them. And he thought he was being righteous. It's diabolical. Because God gets angry too. Righteous anger, right? And if he didn't, God, if somebody's doing something horrible in front of you and God's like, I don't care, God, he doesn't deserve to be worshiped, right? And there's this reminder that yes, he is incredibly merciful and gracious, slow to anger and abounding in love. But he gives guidelines, he gives boundaries. It's not a sin to be angry, okay? It's not a sin to be angry. In fact, there are times when you should be. Ephesians 4 says, be angry, but in your anger, do not sin. Be angry and do not sin. So there's a kind of angry where you're not sinning, and there's an angry where you are sinning. Okay? But in this context, that anxiety, that fear that responds in anger and frustration and fretting and worry, that is the kind of sinning, and we'll unpack why. This passage actually is used in marriage counseling a lot, right? When you're angry with your spouse, because their spouse, your brother and sister and your spouse, the closest people to you have the most power over to make you angry, okay? Some stranger, they might not even trust me. Your spouse can get you really angry, so can you. So the closest people do. And so they use this with premarital counseling, basically saying, if you have a fight, work it out before you go to sleep. And they use this verse, right? Do not let the sun go down on your anger. So here are these exhausted, hungry couple who legalistically are trying to figure things out because they're trying to be faithful to this text. But actually, the text doesn't mean that you have to fix it before the sun comes up. It basically says, don't let your anger stay continually again and again and again. Cap it. And if there's no way to make your anger stop, and you're just constantly boiling over and over and over, that's the kind of anger that's sinning. Okay? Do not let the sun go down on your anger is a time context. Okay? Do not give any opportunity to the devil. Okay? Always being angry works for the Hulk, but it doesn't work for us. Because in the heart of anger, you're going to find there's a narrative going on in our souls. Yeah? We are demanding, I want my way. I want things to be fixed. I don't want to be suffering in the way that I'm feeling right now. I want to control the situation. Yeah? I don't really want to do it God's way. I will exert the emotion and the will that comes from anger that way. But anger only leads to bitterness, loneliness, okay? Envy, depression, self-pity. You'd be surprised how somebody's doing all the right things for the right reasons becomes really a shell of themselves. Because it was a foothold, an open door for the enemy. That last verse, talking about verse 27 in Ephesians, give no opportunity to the devil. The word is foothold. Don't give leverage point. Don't open the door for the enemy to start influencing you. Because that's exactly what happens. There are a lot of people who have so caught themselves up in the righteous anger that they can't extricate themselves to a point where there's a demonic activity involved in this. All of this to say, anger is not the route. Anger is not what you do, okay? When you're up against somebody and they're just spouting all this political stuff and you're just so angry. And when you're so frustrated and you don't know what to do and you're just so angry, that is not the place to stay. Then what are we supposed to do? What is the route? And this is what David tells us to do, the positive. You can't do this if you're angry, okay? Anger disassociates you with God. It rejects God's way, okay? Because God says, vengeance is mine. But we want it for ourselves. In order to do what God is asking us to, we have to give up anger. But then, what do we do when evil is trending? Verse 3, trust in the Lord and do good. Yeah. It seems too simplistic. What do you mean trust? I want it fixed. I want my emotions dealt with. I want my situation dealt with. Surprisingly, this is the core of what a relationship with God looks like and releases all of his activity in our life. It's trust. We never graduate from this simple response. To stay with, to grow in, to experience all of his promises. It's trust. When we filled with anger, we are basically turning our head away from God, our heart away from God, saying, I cannot trust you. I'm going to be filled with whether it's a righteous anger, what it feels like, or an active anger. How do you build trust? If we're supposed to trust in the Lord and do good, how do we do that? Okay? I think it has a lot to do with truth. Yeah. It has a lot to do with truth. When you know the truth of a situation, you can be calm. Yeah? Oftentimes, when we're in an argument and we get really angry, a lot of it's because we don't really know the context. We're not secure. We're not settled. Yeah? But when we know, right, then, it's really easy. Yeah. I remember I thought I was smart, and I had a conversation with a guy I didn't think he was very smart, and he had taken physics, and he told me this, stupid little thing of like, yeah, if you drop a bowling ball and a feather, and there's no air, they'll drop at the same rate and they'll fall on the ground at the same time. I'm like, you idiot! That's impossible! And I started arguing with him, and he was like, no, it's true. I got so angry because this guy who I thought didn't know much actually was saying this, and later on I found out he was right. But he was so calm because he knew he was right. Yeah. When you know the truth about who God is, when you know the truth about his love, about his power, about his wisdom, okay? When you know the truth about him paying attention to us, watching us so carefully, he's not sitting by letting all this happen to us carelessly, okay? What is it, some of the comments about how God knows all the numbers of our hair on our head, okay? For a bald person, it's very easier. It's less numbers, of course. But yeah, it's a changing number. I'm losing hair constantly every single day. Basically, he's saying he's paying attention. He cares. He's powerful. He's got a master plan, and we're deeply entrenched in it. Everything we do matters. Anger is a way of saying, I don't believe you, God. I don't care. It's such a beautiful, simple way. What do you do when evil is trending? And it's so hard. It requires the Holy Spirit. But that's where we say, God, I don't know how to trust you with this. I'm not good at this. But this is what you're asking. Take delight in the Lord, and he will give you the desires of your heart. Isn't that an interesting part? Evil is happening, and God is saying, trust me and enjoy me. Get to know me about how I do things, okay? It's almost like a father saying, watch this, okay? Stick with me, watch this. Watch what I can do. Watch me turn this whole situation around in a way that you could have never have seen, in a timing that wasn't your own, but when it's all perfectly matched around, you'll be shocked. Kind of like Esther and Mordecai, and here's this Haman guy trying to kill them and got it all worked out, and so he's celebrating in advance, and Haman would never have known that the very tool that he was going to destroy Mordecai with, okay, it's not a hanging pole, it's an impaling pole. That's where he would get impaled, a massive reversal. And God's kind of saying, trust me. Commit your way to me and trust him. He's going to do this. So how do we learn to trust him? Yes, it's truth-based. But what is the sign? What is the avenue of trust? Okay? It's not anxiety. It's not angst. It's not anger. It's stillness. Isn't that weird? When somebody's going crazy and you're like calm, right? That's kind of a superpower, but that's actually the way that we build trust. Be still before the Lord. Wait patiently for him. Do not fret. That's the third time it shows up in this short 10 verses. Do not fret when people succeed in their ways, when they carry out their wicked schemes. Okay? Be still. Let God do the work. This is the one thing that I think anger, as well as our media environment, is making it impossible for us to really do. Yeah. And so our trust relationship with God is paper thin sometimes. Okay? You got to just learn how to not only let God calm you, actually be in his presence, to learn how to actually have a conversation with him through his word and through his spirit. It's so simple. But this one thing, walking with God in trust, anchoring ourselves in the truth through his word and through his spirit, in the context of stillness, this will change everything for us. We got to learn how to unplug from all the noise. So I have to take fasting from news at times because it's just too much. We have to learn how to unplug from all of our distractions, from everything that's happening left and right, so that we can be still and we can listen for him. Anybody know what Lectio Divina is? Pastor Finn, he loves Lectio, by the way. We always do it together. Lectio Divina is basically saying, we're not here to listen to Scripture just preached at us. We're not here just to listen to do Bible study, right? We are actually here to hear from God, to be in his presence through his word, yeah? And so we sit through a passage and we slow it down, okay? Slow, okay? And we basically take maybe 3 verses or a little more, maybe sometimes just 1 verse, and we cut it up and we just basically slow it down so that it's starting to soak into our minds. It's so hard when we don't know how to hear God's voice. God is trying to talk to us. He's trying to say, trust me. He's trying to speak to us. But oftentimes, we don't know how to listen. I think Lectio is a powerful way. I mean, I'm doing my doctor of ministry in spiritual formation. And I'm running across all these things where these people are like scientists doing studies and basically can demonstrate that people who do Lectio over the course of a year or 2 years, their rate of spiritual growth is much higher than those who do not. Because it's a daily learning to be still with God, building this relationship of trust with God through his word. So there are 4 steps. There's a lot of different ways to do Lectio. It's an old language. It's like, Latin or Italian. I don't know which one it is. Probably Latin. But basically, the 4 steps go like this. You read, but it's slow. That beautiful verse, be still and know that I am God. You just read, be still. Yeah? And you just meditate on that. You hold on to it. Okay? What does it mean to be still? Okay? And know. What are you saying to me about knowing God? Not in just my head, but in my person, that I am God. Okay? You're slowing down. You're repeating again and again, at least 3 times. And you'd be surprised of how much we missed in the first time we walk it through. And then we meditate on it. The word for meditation oftentimes is associated with like, you're kind of like growling, you're mumbling, okay? That you're going over and over and again. You're vocalizing, but you're chewing it. You're reflecting on it. One of the ways that we've been doing Lectio lately is we'll go through a passage, have somebody read it, and we're just asking God for 1 word or a phrase. In this passage, Lord, what are you saying to me? And we're just paying attention. And surprisingly, every single person comes away with, oh, I felt like this word popped out. Trust. Good. Right? He will. Something will pop out because he's going to talk to you. He wants to talk to you through his word. Yeah? And then once you've kind of gone through and you've heard it, you've stilled yourself and you're waiting on him, you're patiently responding to it, that's the time where oratio is the prayer part. You're saying, God, you're asking me to trust you. I don't know how. Help me. Yeah. I got this fear for my children, and I'm so concerned. I want to lay it at your feet. Yeah. It becomes deep. It becomes so personal because he knows our hearts, and he's reaching us to say, you can trust me with this. But it doesn't happen if we don't know how to be still. Yeah. And then the last part is what's called contemplatio. It's contemplation. And that's actually, you're not thinking about the function. You're not trying to talk or listen or do all this. You're just being there with God. Yeah. Have you ever had a friend where you don't have to say anything and you're just hanging out? Okay. Old couples are really good at this. Yeah. Newlyweds are really bad at this. Yeah. Like, 3 seconds go by, and you're just so awkward, and you got to say something. Oh, how did you like about those them Yankees, right? But old couples, they just kind of look over and they're at peace. They're actually building their relationship just by being together. Yeah. You do this regularly, okay? And you can find this anywhere. These 4 steps. But you do this regularly with God, and watch how little by little your trust relationship begins, because He's paying attention to you. He's speaking to you. You're giving over some of these issues, these anxieties, over to Him. David knows. And so he tells us, trust in the Lord. And I'm going to speed it up in just a bit, but there's a second part to this. Trusting in the Lord is not simply just okay, I feel a place of trust. There is a response. Once you know what God is asking you to do, once you know He's with you, then you can do what He's saying. Not out of anger, not out of, I got to fix this, not out of fear, but out of discernment. Trust in the Lord and do good. You don't have to fix what's happening in Ukraine, right? You don't have to lobby and somehow, but there's going to be something God's going to ask you to do in this environment of evil. You can be consumed with anger and anxiety, or you can, out of this place of stillness and trust, start doing good. You'll be surprised how the little good that He asks you to do, that you do, sets off ripple effects. Do not be overcome by evil, but overcome evil with good. The courage, the clarity about what to do comes from this place where you've spent time with God. Lastly, the why, because He gives lots of promises. Why should we do all these things? Why is this the strategy, the game plan, when you're faced with evil and all these people are succeeding, doing all the wrong? God reminds us. For those who are doing evil and wrong, verse 2, for like the grass, they will soon wither. Like green plants, they will soon die away. It seems so secure and they're going to win all the time. But actually God's saying no. In a moment, in a flash, what seemed to be so secure is going to get blown away. By the way, Psalm 37 is kind of an expansion of Psalm 1. Psalm 1 talks about, blessed is the one who does not sit in the seat of, walk in the way of sinners and does not stand in the way of mockers and seat in sin, right? But those who trust in the Lord, right? Who meditate on His word day and night. So this is an echo of Psalm 1. What happens to the person who does this, who is blessed, right? They become like a tree. They're the ones that are able to stand and withstand even in the heat and the pressure of evil, right? Because they've got a source of life and of water in God, right? And they're going to bear fruit. They're green, their leaves are not going to wither. But the wicked, it looks like they're winning, but they're not. Their time frame is short. And He uses the language of separating the chaff and the kernel. When you got wheat, what you would do is you would throw it up in the air, and the wind would take the light stuff that you don't want. It doesn't make bread. It's all junk, and it would blow it away. And you know what you do with that? You burn it. Basically saying, God is going to take all of these circumstances, and you're going to come to the ground. You're the valuable one. But the evil ones who think they're winning and are always going to win, they're going to actually, their life will be short. Their future will be short. A little while and the wicked will be no more. Though you look for them, they will not be found. Okay? For those who are evil will be destroyed, but those who hope in the Lord, trust in the Lord, are still unable to have this relationship of God, of just drawing from Him from the water of life. They will inherit the land. Okay? That, in fact, all that God has promised will come to those who are meek. Don't use your strength in anger and vengeance or trying to fix things on your own, but trust. Your meekness is not weakness. Meekness is strength under control. Your strength is directed by the discerning God gives you to do good. The meek will inherit the earth and enjoy peace and prosperity. Blessed are the meek, for they shall inherit the earth. I was racking my brains, like, what do I share? Is there a story that I can share about this in my life? And I realized the best example of this is actually the cross. People thought, okay, Jesus was crucified by a bunch of angry men who are fearful for their position. And they thought, if we just get rid of this guy, we'll inherit the land. Yeah? People who are angry and envious, showing off all the fruits of a heart that does not know and trust God. Jesus could have wiped them out. He could have called down legions of angels. But instead, he trusts. They thought they won a huge victory. They wiped out the Son of God. Little did they know this is the moment of the greatest victory of God. Because this is how he works. He fulfills his promises. He says, he will make your righteous reward shine like the dawn, your vindication like the noonday sun. Would you bow your heads with me as we pray?